Did you know that Red Bull is facing its biggest crisis in decades, just as Max Verstappen begins to question his future with the team? And the most surprising thing is that this slide could have started with a decision that seemed impossible just a few months ago. What do you think? Should Verstappen stay or look for a new team? Let us know in the comments. What is happening at Red Bull that could cause the world champion to leave the team? In this video, we'll break down the critical situation facing Red Bull ahead of the 2025 Belgian Grand Prix, with a special focus on the impact this could have on Max Verstappen's future. The environment in which Verstappen operates has changed radically. There are no longer any certainties. There is no longer that sense of invincibility that accompanied the team for so long. The errors on track are just the tip of the iceberg. The real problem is deeper and more raw. There is disorganization, distrust of technical data, and a new chain of command that has not yet been consolidated. The symptoms are also noticeable in the way the team operates during race weekends. Decision-making has become slower, more conservative. The margin for maneuver has been drastically reduced. Confidence in development tools has disappeared. New things are no longer tested with the same aggressiveness as before, because it is unknown whether they will work or end up making the car worse. Furthermore, the media pressure doesn't help. Every race in which Verstappen doesn't make it onto the podium generates headlines. Every pit stop failure, every erroneous tactical decision, every disappointing qualifying session is amplified by an environment that has grown accustomed to seeing Red Bull as the benchmark of perfection. Now that image is crumbling, questions are quick to arise. Where is the team that dominated? What happened to the structure that seemed unbeatable? Even from a symbolic point of view, the situation is uncomfortable. Spa-Francorchamps is not just any circuit. It's a special setting for Verstappen. A track where he has shown, where he has made history. Returning here with a car that can barely challenge for the top positions is not only frustrating. It's also an emotional blow. And that, for a driver who has always raced with very high emotional intensity, can be more damaging than any mechanical problem. It's important to understand that this crisis is not limited to the technical or sporting level. There is a personal burden accumulating on Verstappen's shoulders. The wear and tear of fighting against a car that doesn't respond, of working with a team in transition, of trying to maintain motivation when results aren't coming. But if the present is complicated, the immediate future is even more uncertain. Because while Red Bull restructures and tries to resolve its internal problems, there are already teams on the move outside. Teams that would be willing to do the unthinkable to have Max. The most intriguing thing about all this is that, unlike in previous years, Verstappen no longer closes the door completely. In recent interviews, he has avoided giving definitive answers about his future. There are no forceful declarations of unwavering loyalty. What there is caution, reflection, and above all, silence at key moments. And that, in a driver who has always been clear about his commitment to Red Bull, represents a change of tone that does not go unnoticed. The specialized press has begun to analyze every word, every gesture, every decision. Why is Verstappen spending so much time at the factory lately? Is he trying to regain control of a situation that is spiraling out of control, or is he evaluating whether the project still has a future? The theories are multiplying. Some believe he's simply a committed driver who wants to help turn things around. Others, more skeptical, think he's gathering information before making a career-defining decision. It's important to understand that, in Formula One, external noise is never innocent. Rumors are often intentionally leaked to gauge reactions, pressure teams, or open the door to negotiations. Internally, Red Bull has redoubled its efforts to show Max that it remains committed to success. The decision to launch a critical front-wing update just in time for the Belgian Grand Prix is proof of this. This component was designed in record time to improve the RB21's performance on the fast corners of Spa, a circuit where Verstappen has historically dominated. The goal is clear: to give the driver a minimal tool so he can compete with some dignity against McLaren and Ferrari. However, the team knows that a single improvement is not enough. The performance gap is profound, and time is running out to close it. Max Verstappen, for his part, has publicly appeared professional, but also visibly affected by the situation. In recent statements, he admitted to having returned to the factory to work with the team in the simulator, trying to find solutions alongside the engineers. This gesture demonstrates his involvement, but it's also a sign that he's not satisfied with what he sees. A driver who fully trusts his team doesn't need to take on that technical control role so often. He does it because he wants answers, because he needs to regain his feeling, and because he's probably evaluating how much he can continue to carry the weight of the project. Verstappen's words in the press conference weren't aggressive, but they were revealing. Phrases like, "We're not where we want to be," or "The days of dominance are over," aren't thrown out randomly. They reflect a deep discomfort, a disillusionment that's beginning to take shape. It's the kind of language champions use when they understand that the cycle may be nearing its end. And although Max hasn't publicly broken up with Red Bull, the emotional distance is no longer difficult to perceive. The most delicate thing is that this tension isn't resolved by results alone. What's at stake is the credibility of the project. Verstappen needs to know that the team has a clear vision, a realistic technical plan, and a solid structure to return to the top. Otherwise, no matter how much shared history there is, the present will end up outweighing the past. And if that trust isn't reestablished soon, the question will cease to be whether Max Verstappen wants to stay and become how much longer he's willing to wait. For Red Bull, losing Verstappen would mean more than just a loss of on-track performance. It would be the beginning of the end of a golden era. Max is no ordinary driver. He is the face of a hegemony built with surgical precision. His aggressive driving style, relentless focus, and ability to maximize an imperfect car have made him the differentiating factor in multiple championships. Without him, the team would have to completely redefine itself. And at a time when the internal structure is already unstable, a blow like that could push Red Bull into an even deeper crisis. The loss of Verstappen would also affect the team's morale and internal cohesion. Many high-level engineers, technicians, and professionals at Red Bull are there because they believed in the project that revolved around Max. His departure could trigger a talent drain, slowly dismantling a machine that for years was synonymous with perfection. Furthermore, the Red Bull brand has built much of its recent image around Verstappen. From advertising campaigns to relationships with key sponsors, his value goes far beyond sporting results. On the other hand, the team that manages to sign Verstappen wouldn't just gain a champion driver. It would gain a brutal strategic advantage. The paddock's reaction would be instantaneous. Any team that closes a deal with Max would have to completely restructure its project around him. Because he's not a driver who adapts to what he's given. He imposes demands, conditions, and expects a work environment that matches his ambition. And those willing to offer him the contract must also be prepared to face the pressure of having a figure who demands constant excellence in their hands. Not all teams can handle that. The media pressure would also shift. The spotlight would no longer be solely on Red Bull. It would also be on the team that acquires him, which would have to prove it can match such a dominant figure. And if they don't meet expectations quickly, the same cycle of pressure, frustration, and burnout could be repeated elsewhere. Because when we talk about a team change at this level, the consequences aren't measured solely by results. They're measured by the cultural, emotional, and strategic impact they generate in the heart of each team. Therefore, this possibility isn't a mere hypothesis. It's a real threat to the current balance of the championship. And every day that passes without Red Bull offering concrete solutions, the possibility of a change becomes closer, more credible, and above all, more dangerous for those who thought the Verstappen-Red Bull era would be untouchable. With the Belgian Grand Prix as the immediate stage, the near future of Red Bull and Max Verstappen is completely determined by what happens in the next two races on the calendar. Belgium and Hungary aren't just two more races. They're tests by fire. Red Bull knows this, and that's why it has launched a package of updates that, rather than a gradual improvement, acts as a desperate maneuver to halt a decline that is already evident. The redesigned front wing for Spa is the first piece of a race against time, but its effectiveness remains a mystery. These upgrades come in an extremely demanding technical context. Spa-Francorchamps, with its high-speed corners and constant elevation changes, is not a forgiving circuit. If a car has a weakness, it is immediately noticeable here. And if the new wing fails to generate the promised downforce without penalizing straight-line speed, all the effort will have been wasted. The next step will be the Hungarian Grand Prix, where an even more extensive package of upgrades is expected. Unlike Spa, the Hungaroring demands a completely different approach. It is a circuit that punishes a lack of downforce and demands precise traction in slow corners. The challenge for Red Bull will be to adapt the RB21 to an environment where they have historically enjoyed success, but which could now further expose the car's structural deficiencies if the updates are not perfectly calibrated. From Verstappen's perspective, what happens in these two races will directly influence his view of the project. If he sees progress, if he perceives a real reaction from the team, he may decide to wait, give them time to reorganize, and trust in the rebuilding process. But if what he finds is more frustration, more execution failures, and the same lack of clear direction that has characterized recent weekends, then his patience could run out completely. Therefore, what happens in Belgium and Hungary cannot be analyzed as just another chapter in the championship. It is the turning point that will define whether Red Bull remains a serious title contender or whether it begins to slide into a transitional period. The most striking thing is that all of this is not playing out over the long term. It is happening now, in real time, race after race. Belgium and Hungary are not simply stations on the calendar. They are the stages where a decision can be made that redefines the competitive landscape of the sport. Verstappen, tired of fighting the limitations of an unresponsive car and a structure that has lost its bearings, could be close to making the most difficult decision of his career, leaving. And if that happens, Formula One will never be the same again. Not only because of what Verstappen represents as a driver, but because of what he brings with him. His talent, his influence, his ability to change the fate of any team. Now I want to know your opinion. Do you think Verstappen should stay at Red Bull and focus on rebuilding? Or is this the ideal time to look for a new challenge with another team that offers immediate guarantees of competitiveness? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel.